Hey, leaders and go-getters. If you're here, you're all about growth, pushing boundaries, stepping up, and making an impact. But when it comes to your career, are you leading the game or just playing along? Whether you're chasing a promotion, switching careers, or just want to stand out, it all starts with one thing: your executive summary. And guess what? We've got the Ultimate Executive Summary e-playbook, and it's 100% free. This step-by-step guide will take you from a blank page to a bold, standout executive summary that grabs attention and gets results. It's time to stop blending in and start owning your career story. Download your free copy now at leadthegame.org/free resources. And while you're there, check out 3 more powerful tools to help you take control of your career. Don't let your resume ride the bench. Get in the game. Head to leadthegame.org/free resources and grab your free e-playbook today. Now back to the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is our Life and Leadership podcast, where we're living out loud the pages of the books that are on our bookshelves. My name is Denise Russo. My co-host is Sam Powell, and together we're reading a book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. This book is a small book. It is about the art of turning your trials into triumph, and we are about midway through the book, and today we're going to be talking about something that's a little bit challenging around the way we look at obstacles. So Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm dealing with plenty of obstacles in my life currently, so this is good. And I think these 2 chapters that we'll cover today are really about, I don't know, kind of turning the obstacle on its head a bit and sort of using it against itself in a way, which is definitely interesting. I think we're in this action part of the book, and we've been talking about a lot more like direct action, right? Moving forward, pushing, going to the side, the flank attack, like we talked about last time, like all that kind of stuff. This is a little bit more creative, I think, in the attack of the obstacle.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting because we've talked about a couple things off mic that maybe we'll bring into the discussion today. But basically, this section here is talking around things like having patience, looking at your obstacles differently and more strategically, and sort of like a game of chess where you have to play the move, knowing that the move you're playing needs to consider the moves that are going to happen after that move, it seems like.
Yeah, I think chess is a good analogy for this one. So this chapter is called Use the Obstacles Against Themselves. And he says, sometimes you overcome obstacles not by attacking them, but by withdrawing and letting them attack you. And I think this is the chapter I still have lots of highlights in it, but I was having a harder time thinking about stories on this one and thinking about I don't know. I think this one takes a little bit of like a secondary thought, because this is almost about not taking action. It's just it's kind of a different thing. And so it's hard to remember the things that we don't do in effort to, like you said, kind of move the chess pieces later down the road. Yeah. And so it's interesting. Like, this one's just interesting, and I think takes you a minute to really rethink. Like, when I think about using a big obstacle against itself, I have to get really creative, and it's hard for me to think in that space, especially because I think I'm just kind of more like offensively action oriented, right? Like on the offense side. Like, this is more of like the defense side of action.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Have you heard of this book or this like concept teaching from Mel Robbins called Let Them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wonder if it's kind of like that. Like the gist of it is that if somebody's doing something like to you or bothering you or doing something that you disagree with, the gist of it is that she says, just let them.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems opposite, right? Like you want to go on the attack, you want to
Right.
respond and react, but she says, you just let them be, let them sort of like burn their own bridges, break their
Mm-hmm.
own issues, just let them. And that you control the controllables. And that's kind of the gist, even in some of the stories here, sort of. I mean, there's a story where the author is talking about how when Martin Luther King Jr. was dealing with some very intense physical forces against him and his followers, that his philosophy was to treat people with love and peace and standing still. And somehow, I would imagine there were people that were in his group that disagreed with that approach
Mm-hmm.
because it's much easier to go at the problem, to go kind of rushing through the obstacle instead of standing back from the obstacle and figuring out, how do you overcome the obstacle? The author says that non-action can be action. But you're right. I had a really hard time coming up with examples because I think I'm the type of person and the type of business leader that is always poised to do something, not do nothing.
Right. We're in this like problem solving mode all the time. Like, oh, there's a problem. I'm going to go take action. I'm going to go do something to solve it. And this is more of the let's let them burn themselves out. Like, and the thing I was thinking about as I was trying to like actively think, like I said, normally stuff jumps to my mind as I'm reading things and like, oh yeah, here's this, that, or whatever. This one, not so much. This is more of a slow burn. And I was thinking about parenting more than anything else. Like, especially thinking about, like toddlers or like younger kids who are just like throwing a tantrum or, doing whatever. Like you sort of have to let them burn themselves out on that energy a little bit, right? In a safe way, in a way that's, appropriate for the age. But you sort of have to, I mean, like you said with Mel's book, is like you sort of have to let them be, because from there you can then do something, right? It's like I can't, like when we're triggered, when the emotions are high, when there are things going on, it's like you almost have to just let that fizzle back down to, just a more like we get back into our rational brain and then take action. So it's almost like when you're met with that huge force that you can't fight, you can't, like there's no fighting somebody else's strong emotional, whatever reaction that they're having. You almost have to like be that calm in the storm and sit. And like I do that a lot with, like I have little kids, right? So like just letting my son have his big feelings, like, going through that and doing that in a way that's safe. But like he's just got to come back down sometimes. And that's the win, because if I'm trying to fight the thing that's unfightable, it just escalates, right? It just goes off in a different direction instead of controlling me and controlling, my reaction and things like that. And that's sort of what I thought about with this more than anything else, is that's where I think I use this the most in my life. And I've used that a lot in emotionally charged situations with like customers in the corporate world, right? Like I think about every emotionally charged escalation I've ever been on, which were a lot of, people yelling, screaming, this is what this is going to do. I need this done now, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's almost like this force they come at you with of like, do it now, fix it now, make it happen. And it's like, that's not how this works. Like, I can't do that. And so I have to be the centered, calm, use like almost somehow leveraging that against them to find the other path, the other win in.
I wonder if some of this is leveraging the power of listening, because if you're in a charged engagement with someone, they're on attack perhaps, and maybe are anticipating and expecting you to be also. So they're preparing for their next move, expecting you to attack back.
Right.
I like the word you used, fizzle. It's kind of a fun word, fizzle.
Yeah.
And the author uses it and says sometimes in life, You have to have patience and wait for temporary obstacles to fizzle out.
Mm.
Let two jousting egos sort themselves out instead of jumping immediately into the fray. Sometimes a problem needs less of you, fewer people, period, and not more. And when you were describing the situation with your family, I can recall just this week, my dad was upset about something. I don't even remember what it was, because to me it wasn't important. To him it was important, but to me it wasn't. And he was just ranting. And it treats me sometimes like I'm 5, not 55. And I just let him talk, let him kind of yell at me or yell towards me, I suppose. And I didn't say anything. And finally, when he was kind of done, he was stunned a little bit. He was like, well, aren't you going to say something? And I was like, well, I heard you.
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything else after that. And he kind of got a little bit more upset.
Uh-huh.
But, you push for what you want from someone or from something or from some opportunity or to get around that obstacle. And it isn't always going to go your way. I like the part where in this part of the chapter that the author talks about this from a business perspective, that we push and push to get a new raise, to get a new client, to prevent something from happening. But in fact, the best way to get what we want might be to re-examine those desires in the first place, or it might be to aim for something else entirely different and use the impediment as an opportunity to explore a new direction. And so that got me to thinking about some colleagues, former colleagues that I've been talking with lately, where they're in a situation where they might be in a role that either is changing or they anticipate it's changing, and they're starting to think about what those changes might be like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's as you're saying that, I'm thinking exactly that thing. Like, right, you're anticipating all of these big reorganizations, adjustments, things that could be happening, and you can't control these giant moving pieces, right? You need them to sort of take their time and figure it out, and then you step in, right, in this very like calm and rational way.
I don't know if I was telling this in the last episode or an episode previously, that there's a friend of mine who his job is being impacted. And so the obstacle, if you will, is that his job is being impacted. And so he's a super rational person, not an emotional person. And he was telling me, well, here's the reality is I'm going to use this obstacle against itself, literally like this chapter is. And he said, the issue is there's an obstacle. My job is being impacted. But the opportunity in that is I was able to step back from that and look at the issue and decide, do I want to continue in this same path, in this same career, in the same industry even? And I think I was telling a story about a totally separate colleague of mine a couple of weeks ago that was faced with a similar situation, and that other colleague decided, I'm going to try to do something completely out of the ordinary, like maybe even buy a franchise instead of going and looking for a full-time corporate career in the thing I know that I've known for 30 years of my normal life, that maybe I try something completely different. And here's the thing, both of those individuals would not have tried the different thing just naturally because they were comfortable. So maybe using obstacles against themselves is because if you're comfortable, you have to become uncomfortable in order to either do nothing and step back and look at it like this chapter is suggesting, or where you can at least with clarity have slowed down enough to see, is it possible that there's something different or better that was right outside my blind spot?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's that taking the step back. And I think this is especially useful when the obstacle feels huge, right? When it feels like I'm powerless, I don't know what I can do about it, right? Like he has this quote in there here that says, remember, a castle can be an intimidating, impenetrable fortress, or it can be turned into a prison when surrounded. And so I think that this is the chapter for, I'm facing something that feels out of reach for me to take action against. Like I could chip away at it, but it's going to do nothing. And so instead, thinking about how do I use that against the obstacle, right? Like if the power is too big against me, how do I find the way to leverage its own power to burn itself out, to fizzle itself out, to, play the weight game almost. And he says inaction, is action really, right? It's a choice. It's not like, oh, I'm going to, bury my head in the sand and pretend like nothing's happening. I'm making a very conscious decision to wait this one out, or to do a little leveraged push here that makes the obstacle itself sort of collapse in on itself a bit.
Yeah, I think it's because it needs to be a sustainable strategy, right? You're trying to change something that may be long term, or far into the future or something like that. And so when you think about needing to have a strategy, the author says you also need to have humility, which I thought was an interesting way for him to sort of round out this chapter. And he says that when you take a humble approach to how you use the obstacle against itself, as opposed to maybe like a more cavalier approach per se, he says it means that you accept that the way you originally wanted to do things just isn't possible. You just haven't got it in you to do it the traditional way. But then he says, but so what? Because maybe that traditional way isn't the way.
Exactly. Maybe the way is the other path, and this obstacle is the thing that's helping you find that other path, right? Like your colleagues that you were talking about. And I think about this, and I'm not one who ever studied politics or, really understands all the nuance of it all that great. But this feels like where you would have to employ that type of strategy. Like I've lost the race when I wanted to win. And so now I've got to play the long game of the next 2 years, 4 years, whatever the time frame is till the next election is, of how am I going to move? This person clearly has more support behind them than I did. So how do I move this? And it's not like taking no action, but it's not that like, I'm going to go attack this person for 4 years and, drive them down and do whatever. It's no, I'm going to leverage whatever they're doing that I'm the opposite of. Like there's almost like that's like the counterbalance to stuff a bit. And like it feels like this would be one of those places where, I don't know, like if I were in that realm of career or whatever, that I would really think about of how do I use the strength of the obstacle or of my opponent, like against them, to then, make it part of my path. And then again, and I think that this is where the humility comes in of like, you have to admit defeat of the path you were on, right? Like you have to be humble enough. And I think that, so often like in a political sphere or something, you just don't find humility a lot. And that's it. But if we could be humble and say, this is what happened, right? I did lose in this space. And so now how do I come out of this in a humble way that takes action differently, right? So it kind of makes me think of that, especially just like in, political climates of the world today. Like, I wonder what would happen if someone were to take this kind of an approach. Like, I would like to see that play out. I think that would be really interesting.
I think you should go be a political consultant because so many of them could get value from what you just shared. For sure. I love that you said it was about the long game. And that actually segues great into the next chapter, which is about channeling your energy. Because if it indeed is a long game and not a short game, and you don't want to fizzle out, then channeling your energy is going to be the right approach. And so this chapter starts with another Marcus Aurelius quote. This must be his favorite old-timey person that he likes to quote.
I feel like he is the stoic of the stoics. Like he's the guy.
He's the guy.
I think that's why he gets quoted the most.
It's quoted the most. And so he says, when you're jarred, unavoidably by circumstances, revert at once to yourself and don't lose the rhythm more than you can help. You'll have a better grasp of harmony if you keep going back to it. And so this chapter about channeling your energy, it's a chapter that actually talks a lot about some athletic stories. And so I think that if we bring it into today's stories, we just saw recently the NCAA basketball championship. I know you're a basketball fan, Sam. And so the Gators just won the basketball championship for college basketball. And I'll tell you what, the last game of the series where they were playing their opponent in Texas, and the opponent was a Texas team in Texas, it just seemed like everything was going to be against the Gators. Now, of course, I'm biased. I am a Gator, and so I wanted my boys to win. But what happened was throughout the whole beginning of this last game, they weren't channeling their energy at all. They were all over the place. They were running frantically, and they were missing shots. Every free throw was missed, and they were losing passes, and the rebounds were terrible. Like, it was horrible. And from the get-go, it seemed like they were going to not prevail. In fact, they were only in the lead 3 times in the game. And it wasn't until the last part of the game when they won the entire national championship. But what happened was it seemed like after the second half began, they were channeling their energy, because even the newscasters were talking about how, all right, maybe they did their job. They tired out the other team because they were running all over the place. They seemed kind of frantic. It didn't seem like it was a strategy, but maybe it was a strategy. But once they seemed to become united, everything turned around. They then came up from like a 12-point underdog. Then they became like even. Then they were up, and then they were down, and then they were up, and in the end they ended up winning. But so this was all about the fact of watching them not succumb to the frustration or feeling like we're just not getting into our groove. They played the long game and prevailed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's so true, right? It's that second half comeback of like, I've channeled my energy. I'm not going to let the frustration, right? He says, instead of giving into frustration, we can put it to good use. It can power our actions, which, unlike our disposition, become stronger and better when loose and bold. And as you're telling that story, I was thinking about my sophomore year of high school. I moved from a very big high school in Texas to a very small school overseas. And in the small school, we didn't have as many like I went from Texas where like there's a coach everywhere you go, right? Like there's plenty of athletic coaches for every sport almost all the time, and to this environment where it's like this random person who has no experience but is willing to help will now be the coach. Like it became that kind of situation. So I walked into this school as a sophomore, and the varsity basketball coach was a track guy. He had never, he wasn't a basketball person at all. So he didn't know anything about like really making a good basketball team specifically, but he did know that how to run, and he did know how to get you into really good shape. And he said that to us. He was like, listen, basketball's not my absolute forte. Like I'm here, I'm gonna do my best. I know enough will be good. He's like, but I do know that there's 4 quarters in this game, and we're gonna be the fourth quarter game, the team. We're gonna be the team that in the fourth quarter is still playing just as strong as we were in the first quarter, and we're just gonna outlast everybody. And that's going to be our strategy. And I have never been in better shape than at the end of that basketball season in my life. And he's right. We did. I mean, we ran, and we were just in better shape than every other team. And so while they were waning towards the end of the game, we're still playing the same, across the whole team. And I think that that's what it is. It was channeling and, almost strengthening that energy to make it last the whole time, right? Like we honed our bodies to be able to, to really do that when the other team then is super frustrated at the end. They're making all these mistakes because we're still, still playing. But yeah, I think that it's that thought process of this is the long game, and how do we channel all of the energy? And he talks a lot about like, in the face of frustration, right? Like there's something that's dragging me down. There's some huge thing in my way that makes this unfair, that makes this, this situation where like, I can't believe this is the situation I'm in. And so I hone in on my craft. I hone in on what I can control. So like to me, like while the last chapter we were just talking about is about when I'm facing those big obstacles that feel unmovable, this is the chapter for I'm facing the obstacles that feel incredibly unfair and I'm super frustrated. And so now I've got to think about channeling my energy into the things that work, into the things that are going to get us into the fourth quarter and get us to play the long game, to get us to make the comeback against the home team.
So it's interesting the way you're describing it, because, and you were mentioning about politics earlier. So there's a lot of armchair politicians and newscasters on social media, right? And so this chapter is really talking about something super important, whether you're talking about politics or sports or your job or even your relationships. But I think it really lends itself more to the first three, which is the author says you can act out or you can act. And there's one thing that's more reactive and there's one thing that is more responsive. And so the idea of acting versus acting out basically changes something from a negative to a positive, doesn't it? When you channel your energy into the right direction, a positive energy is going to bring around traction and action towards something different or better, because maybe the thing you're acting out on is the obstacle. If I go back to that game I was talking about, there was one part in the game, there was a play where there should have been a foul called on the player, and he knew it. He knew there should have been a foul called where he would have gotten a chance for some free throws. And so he didn't get called for it. And so he took the ball and he slammed it into the court. So of course, then he gets fouled. He got fouled because he thought he should have received a foul. And so it turned against himself. This is where he didn't channel his energy right. He didn't use the obstacle against itself. And at that moment, when that happened in the game, the other team, when they shot their free throws, they got the points and they took the lead. So it worked in the reverse because he acted out instead of acting, just letting it go. Sometimes a ref is going to call it bad play. Sometimes the other aisle of whoever you're against is going to make a bad decision that doesn't play towards your belief systems or values. Sometimes at work, your boss or your coworkers or another team or a customer or a competitor will do something that feels derailing to you, but you can either act out or you can act and follow the focus that the obstacle there could be the way towards something better, right? That's the whole point of this book.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you're spot on with that. Right. And it's funny, I wrote down the same thing when you called it the armchair politicians. I highlighted the exact same quote and wrote like, this is the internet in a nutshell. This is the comment section on everything, right? The people who are just responding and doing whatever they want to do, right? Instead of like taking a second. And I think sports is such a good metaphor for this. You're spot on with people reacting when things don't go their way and, all that sort of good stuff. And it's funny, my father-in-law just came to visit, just to come up and see us on Sunday. And he was talking to my son about, you've got to make sure that like you can get back in the game, like when things happen or whatever. I don't even know how they got on that subject, but he was doing, going on and on about that. And but this is actually something my son does really well. Like he stays super consistent through the whole game. Like he'll have big feelings and that kind of stuff. But like when it comes back to like getting back out there and doing it, like he'll do it. He'll have the explosive 10-year-old moment of like, blah, 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 but then settles back in and like does the thing he needs to do and gets back into it. And I think that that's such an important skill that we learn as we take that feeling and instead of exploding outward, we almost explode inward and harness all of that energy to become something different. And I wrote, at the end, like he says at the end of this, like, we're immune, like if we're doing this right, like we're immune to the external stressors and limitations that march us towards our goal because we really are, right? We act like it, but because we really are, if we're honing our energy inward to really make something happen. It reminds me of my dad was a teacher and a coach, he still is, it was my whole life. And I remember him telling me one time, like my dad's not a yeller. He never has been. Like it's very rare, like that he would actually like raise his voice and yell. And he and I were talking about that once, and he said that, what's much scarier for someone is if you lower your voice and you talk really quietly at them, right? Like they explode, they go whatever, but you harness all of that. And instead of like yelling back and exploding back, you're like, yeah, like, come here, let me talk to you. And it is like intimidating as all get out. And it's that kind of energy that I think this whole chapter is about, is like you pull all that explosion, all that big energy, feelings, whatever, and you pull it inside yourself, and then you come out controlled with it. And that is, I mean, that's the kind of thing where you're looking at the person going, oh my gosh, like, who is this? Like, what is happening here?
It's funny that you're saying that, because the chapter says this drives your opponents and competitors nuts. It literally, that's the sentence. It drives your competitors and your opponents nuts. And so what I marked as sort of my closing thoughts on this chapter was the author says, to be physically and mentally loose takes no talent. That's just recklessness. We want right action, not action. Period. So I guess to close out what we've talked about today is this is about strategic thinking. It's about intentional actions. It's about looking at the obstacle for what it is, controlling what you can control and letting the rest go to the side. And we have 2 more chapters to go, which will be 1 episode, which will be next week, to round out this section of the book. So this section of the book, remember, is all about action. So next week, we're going to be talking about seizing the offensive and preparing for none of it to actually work. So it should be
sounds great. So inspiring.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of end on maybe a down note for the middle part of the book, but let's see when we get there. So Sam, what else do we need to leave our listeners with for today?
I think as you're going through the week, think about action a little bit differently, right? Think about taking that extra second to pause and think and figure out maybe how to approach this in a bit of a different way that's not the obvious action.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, friends, if you're listening and you're new to our show, we would love for you to grab a copy of the book. We will make sure that we can get you links to these books. This is a book called The Obstacle is the Way. Also, if you're new to the show, we'd really love for you to subscribe, because these episodes come out every Wednesday. If you are not new to the show, or even if you are, one thing that has become something that is a perceived potential obstacle for us is we have an opportunity as well, which is another show that runs in the same week on a different day. And so if you find yourself thinking, well, gosh, that's not Sam and Denise on this show that I just got the second link for this week, it's because we have another amazing show that's hosted by our producer. So Zach Elliott is the producer of What's on Your Bookshelf, and he hosts a separate exclusive edition series. So just wanted to give you a heads up that if you're listening and you're thrown off a little bit, we do have 2 shows a week. One is this show on The Obstacle is the Way, and the other show right now is going through a book called Extreme Ownership. Sam, anything else we should share about that to make it easier for listeners?
Oh, you should definitely check it out, especially if you have any touch to the military at all, like your parents, grandparents, you yourself, like any kind of, relationship to the military whatsoever. It is definitely a good series to check out. I'm loving it. I went to high school on an Army base. My grandfather was in the military. I definitely am loving the relationships and the discussion that you guys are having between, the military mindsets and lessons learned and that sort of thing, and leadership itself that you can pull over into the corporate world. So definitely check it out if you haven't, because it is really great. And if you just keep listening, like if you binge these out, you'll hear in between all of our episodes, the episodes of Denise and Zach, and they are definitely worth a listen. So check it out.
Awesome. Yeah, both books actually dovetail nicely together. So we look forward to your feedback. We'll have ways for you to also reach us through our social media channels and our websites. Make sure you check out Sam's website, leadthegame.org. leadthegame.org. And we'll look forward to seeing you or being with you next week. My name's Denise Rousseau, and on behalf of my friend Sam Powell, thanks for joining us on another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.